Rain hammered the glass tower of Cross Industries at 11 at night, and Wren Callahan pushed her cleaning cart past the executive floor with her hood still damp from the walkover, because cleaners weren't allowed to use the marble lobby entrance, and she caught her own reflection in the dark window 40 floors above the city and thought, not bad for a woman worth $200 million nobody knows about, then laughed under her breath because saying it out loud made it sound insane, and somewhere behind the frosted glass of the corner office a man's voice snapped, "Get out, all of you now!" And 3 assistants scattered past her so fast one of them knocked her cart sideways and didn't even look back. And that was Damian Cross, the CEO everyone in this building was terrified of, cold, exacting, unmarried at 34, despite the tabloids marrying him off to someone new every month, and Wren had heard the rumors that he'd been a different man before his younger brother died in a car wreck 18 months ago. That grief had hollowed him out and left something sharp and armored behind, and none of it was her business, because in 6 days her father's will would finally clear probate and she would walk into a boardroom as the majority shareholder of Callaway Holdings, the quiet parent company that owned 40% of Cross Industries, and she needed these 6 days to see this company from the ground floor before she inherited the ceiling. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her, sharp, impatient. "You're blocking the elevator bank." And she turned, and it was him, Damian Cross, tie loosened, jaw tight, looking at her like she was furniture that had wandered into the wrong scene. "Sorry," she said, and wheeled the cart aside, and he walked past without another word, and she thought, there's the famous warmth everyone talks about, and went back to emptying trash cans full of contracts nobody would ever let her read, even though she'd once negotiated contracts twice their size. 3 nights later, she was vacuuming the executive lounge when she found him standing at the window with a glass of scotch. He wasn't drinking, staring at nothing, and she almost backed out, but he said, without turning, "You're the one who reorganized the supply closet on 12, and she blinked. "I labeled the shelves, yes. "The inventory system I've paid consultants $40,000 to design isn't half that efficient," he said, and finally looked at her. Really looked. "What's your name?" "Wren," she said, and didn't offer a last name. "Wren," he repeated, like he was filing it away. "Keep your head down and stay out of Vanessa's way. She doesn't like staff who talk to me." And Wren said, "I wasn't talking to you, sir. You talked to me." And something almost like a smile moved across his mouth before he caught it and killed it, and Vanessa Hale, his fiancée, blonde and precise and always photographed at the correct angle, made herself known the following week when she cornered Wren in the executive bathroom reapplying lipstick and said, "You're new." "3 weeks," Wren said. "And you're already talking to Damian in the lounge. I saw the memo from security," Vanessa said. "He asked me a question about a supply closet," Wren said, and Vanessa's eyes went flat and cold. "Let me explain something. Cleaning staff don't get personal conversations with the CEO, they get invisible, stay invisible," and walked out, and Wren stood there and thought about the $200 million and the 40% stake and how satisfying it would be to say so right now, and didn't, because her father's final letter had said, "Patience is the only leverage they can't buy from you." And 6 days became 6 weeks because the lawyers found an old codicil that needed verifying, and in that time something shifted. Small things. Damian started saying good evening when he passed her cart. He started noticing when she wasn't on shift and asking the building manager where she was. He caught her once actually reading a Financial Times someone had left in the break room trash, and instead of walking past, he sat down across from her and said, "What do you think of the Meridian acquisition?" Testing her, she could tell. And she said, "I think you're overpaying for a company whose only real asset is a patent that expires in 3 years, and your board knows it, and they're letting you walk into it because someone on that board is shorting Cross stock." And his scotch stopped halfway to his mouth. "How do you know that?" "I read a lot of trash," she said. And he laughed, actually laughed. A short, rough sound like it hadn't been used in a while, and said, "You should be running a hedge fund, not emptying my trash cans." "Maybe I have other plans," she said, and he studied her a beat too long. "Who are you, Wren?" And she said, "Just someone doing her job, sir," and left before he could ask again, but he didn't let it go. He started digging, quietly, the way a man does when something in his gut refuses to sit still, and 3 nights after that, he found her on the roof access landing during her break, sitting on an overturned bucket eating a sandwich, staring at the skyline, and he sat down on the step beside her without asking, which surprised them both. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to not make it weird." "No promises," she said, and he almost smiled again. 18 months ago, I was walking home from my brother's funeral, drunk, which I'm not proud of, and I got jumped 2 blocks from my building, 3 of them, and I went down hard, and I would have stayed down if a woman hadn't come out of nowhere and pulled them off me, hit one of them with her own bag hard enough to break his nose, called the police, stayed with me until the ambulance came even though I couldn't stop crying in front of a total stranger, and I never got her name because I passed out, and I have spent 18 months trying to find her because she is the only person who has looked at me like a human being instead of a headline since my brother died. And Wren went very still, because she remembered that night too, remembered the rain, remembered a stranger bleeding on the sidewalk with red-rimmed eyes who kept saying his brother's name like an apology. And she had never told anyone because it wasn't a story. It was just a Tuesday where she'd done what anyone should do. What did she look like? Wren asked carefully, testing the ground. I don't fully remember. It was dark, but she had a scarf, green, with little embroidered birds on it. My mother's design, actually, from years ago. I remember thinking that was strange. And Wren's hand went unconsciously to her coat pocket, where a green scarf with embroidered birds sat folded, the one her father had given her the last Christmas before he died, and she said nothing, because saying something now, in this stairwell, in this uniform, felt like it would collapse everything before it had a chance to be real. I have to go, she said, standing too fast. My break's over. And he watched her go with the particular focus of a man who has just found the missing piece of something and doesn't yet know it. 2 weeks later, the will cleared, fully, finally, and Wren's lawyer called her into his office and slid a folder across the desk and said, Ms. Callahan, as of this morning, you are the controlling shareholder of Callaway Holdings, which, as you know, owns 41% of Cross Industries. The board has scheduled an emergency session for Friday to formally introduce you. And Wren sat with that for a long moment and thought about 6 weeks of trash cans and supply closets, and a man who talked to her like she was a person, and thought, this changes everything. And it did, faster than she wanted, because Vanessa Hale, in her endless campaign to find leverage over a fiancé who'd grown steadily colder toward her and steadily warmer toward the woman who mopped his floors, hired someone to follow Wren, and found out exactly who she was 2 days before the board meeting, and instead of coming to Wren, or to Damian, she went straight to the company gala Thursday night, the biggest event of the Cross Industries calendar, 500 guests, press everywhere, and had Wren, who was working the event in uniform, refilling ice at the bar because she hadn't yet stepped down from her cover, pulled in front of the entire ballroom. Everyone, Vanessa announced into a microphone she'd taken from the DJ, silencing the room. I think you should all know that the cleaning woman circulating your champagne has been lying to this company for 2 months. Her name isn't just Wren, it's Wren Callaway, heir to Callaway Holdings. She's been spying on Cross Industries this entire time, probably to manipulate a merger, probably to manipulate Damian personally. And gasps rippled through the crowd, cameras turned, and Vanessa smiled like she'd already won. Security, please escort her out. She does not belong here. 2 security guards started forward, and Wren set down the ice bucket very calmly and said, loud enough to carry, before they do that, someone should call legal, because as of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the controlling shareholder of the company that owns 41% of this one, which technically makes me your boss's boss. And the room went dead silent, and Vanessa's smile cracked. That's a lie. Prove it. And Wren looked at Damian, who had gone white and still across the room, staring at her like the floor had opened. Damian, she said, the scarf in my coat pocket has embroidered birds on it, your mother's design. I've had it since before I ever set foot in this building, and she watched it land on him, watched 18 months of searching collapse into a single stairwell conversation, and he crossed the ballroom in 10 strides, past his fiancée, past the security guards, past every camera in the room, and stopped in front of Wren and said, quiet enough that only she could hear, It was you. It was me, she said, the whole time. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know if you were the kind of man who'd be kind to a cleaner before I found out if you'd be honest with an heiress, she said. And you were, every single time? That's not something money can verify. And Vanessa, still holding the microphone, red-faced now, tried one last swing. This is absurd. She's clearly manipulated her way in, Damian. You cannot seriously believe... And Damian didn't even look at her. Vanessa, you just publicly humiliated the majority shareholder of this company's parent holding in front of every major investor we have. On camera, I think you've made the board's decision about your position here a lot easier than they expected. And Wren's lawyer, who had quietly slipped into the ballroom during the commotion exactly on schedule, stepped forward with the verified filing papers held up for the room and the cameras to see, and said clearly, For the record, Ms. Calloway's shareholder status was legally finalized this morning, notarized, filed, and public as of 5 p.m. today, so no, this is not a lie. And the room that had gasped in scandal a minute earlier now buzzed with something closer to awe, and one board member near the front actually started clapping, slow and then not slow. And Vanessa set the microphone down on the bar with shaking hands and walked out through a crowd that no longer looked at her at all, and Wren turned back to Damian, still in her cleaning uniform in a ballroom full of gowns, and said, "For the record, I wasn't spying on your company, I was trying to understand it, and you, before I decided whether either was worth keeping." "And your verdict?" he asked, and she smiled, still deciding. And he laughed, that same short rough sound from the stairwell, freer this time, and took her hand in front of everyone, uniform and all, and said, "Then let me help you decide, properly, no cart, no disguise, just dinner, tomorrow." And she said, "I have a board meeting at 9. "I know," he said. "I'll be there too. Technically you're my boss now." "Technically," she agreed. And 6 months later, when Cross Industries and Callaway Holdings announced a formal merger under joint leadership, the press release included one line that made every entertainment desk in the country reprint the story with a new headline that the CEO had proposed to his co-chair in the same stairwell where she'd once eaten a sandwich on an overturned bucket, and kept, framed in his office, a green scarf with embroidered birds, and a single line from that night that he told every reporter who asked, verbatim, every time. "She rescued me twice, once from 3 men in the rain, and once from becoming a man who couldn't recognize kindness when it was mopping his floors."